It was a struggle not to pull a collage deck for every single one of these. I like talking about my things. I like sharing my stuff. I can't count, which is ironic with the mathematics book, don't you think? There's a kinship between the art styles, you know? Oh, but this is beautiful. Maybe I should put them next to each other on a bookshelf and be like, you two just make friends. It's not keeping it secrets. I'm just stalling for time because I love this deck. I am obsessed. Hello everybody, it's Sylvie. Welcome back to Tarot Magpie. I hope you're doing all kinds of good. I'm doing a tag today. This was created by Candy over at Candy Soul and Soil fairly recently, I think, a few weeks ago. This is called the Collections Meets Decks tag, and the idea is that we show off some of the other things that we collect besides tarot decks and match them up with decks in our collection. So that is what I'm doing today. I will of course link Candy's channel, and I think she's done 2 videos now. She did one with her Ladybird children's books and another one with her various swan decor pieces. So I will link Candy and her videos below. I also would really love to see who else has done this tag because I'm nosy. I want to know what everybody collects. I want to know their weird little trinket collections and how they feel about them and how they would match them up with decks. So without further ado, I'm going to get into it. The collection that I'm sharing with you today is too unwieldy to really show off on camera, but I collect secondhand books from charity shops to chop up and collage with. So for instance, this is a collage I made fairly recently. I'm hoping to turn these into an oracle deck when I feel slightly more finished with them. This is magazines and books and all sorts of stuff. And that's what I'm showing off today. So I'm going to get straight into it and show you my collection and then match them up with decks. Okay, so this is the Anatomy colouring book. I didn't actually buy this secondhand. I bought this years ago when I was doing some of my archaeology study because the skeletal stuff in here was really useful. Now, of course, I can only find like hair, like joints. You've got articular joints in the how the bones form, the suture lines, all that good stuff. I didn't actually colour it in. I think I did some of the skull stuff, if I can find any of the skull stuff. And then I was like, well, I can't very well sell it because I've coloured bits of it in. And then I just held on to it for ages. And then I realised this is super cool to use as collage because it's black and white elements. It's that hand drawn. It's just very cool. So yeah, the Anatomy colouring book. And the deck that I'm pairing with this is the Tarot of the Toiling Hands. This is a deck that I don't pull out too often because it's hard for me to like visually like read the image of the card and like see what's going on. My eyes get confused. So I don't really reach for this too often, but it's such cool art that I'm not getting rid of it anytime soon. And the reason I chose this deck to match up with the Anatomy colouring book is partly because it's black and white, and obviously the book is black and white illustrations, but also because it's got these titles on it, so it's kind of straightforward. It's quite Rider-Waite-Smith clone-y as well. Like it's not keeping its secrets. It's quite clear as to what's going on, which I think matches up quite well with these scientific descriptive diagrams. And you could totally read these titles as like labels in the same way that these diagrams are all labeled. This is tattoo art. It's extremely cool. I think it's really beautiful. But yeah, like we've got the world, the whole master of the complete universe. And there's some fairly anatomically correct looking skulls on there. 4 of Cups, the daughter of reflection and decline. 7 of Wands, tenacious god of competition and dominion. They're really cool titles. I really like them. So that is the Tarot of the Toiling Hands paired up with the Anatomy colouring book. All right, this absolute beauty is called the Scallop. I don't know if that's showing up. And I love this cover. This is what really drew me to it But this is a book about the Scallop. I haven't decided what I'm doing with this yet. I don't know if I'm going to like gut it for collage fodder or if I'm going to adapt it to like use it as a journal, like a altered book. Like I love these black and white illustrations. We've got the biology of how it swims, and there's a whole chapter in here about Aphrodite, Venus as well. Like here we've got a symbol in ancient times, this burial urn from Greece, and then somewhere I'm fairly sure that Aphrodite, Venus shows up. Like there we go, the birth of Venus, Botticelli. Yeah, the cradle of Venus. It's beautiful. I really love the images. I also, because I love the outside of this so much, I'm thinking I might strategically remove pages that have the images that I really want to use and then use it as a kind of art journal, altered book situation. I love this medieval image as well. But yeah, so probably no surprises. The deck that I'm pairing with this is the Tarot of Aphrodite because of her association with scallop shells. Like here we've got the birth. This isn't the birth of Venus by Botticelli. It's the birth of Venus, but it's not Botticelli's birth of Venus. Yeah, it's a fine art deck all about Aphrodite, and the justice is so good. I was going to say I really strongly associate Aphrodite with the sea. She is very strongly associated with the sea, but that in particular is one of the ways that I associate with her, if that makes sense. The sea and shells and all that good stuff. So here we have the birth of Venus. And yeah, this one was kind of a no-brainer. Like I say, a pretty obvious choice. I also do appreciate the fact that this is a fine art deck. And there is a lot of, I think there's a lot of fine art in here. Yeah, especially in Aphrodite as a symbol. I also think that it just fits because this is a fine art deck. There's a fair bit of fine art references in here. And it's just a very beautiful object. This deck is a very beautiful object, in my opinion. So it makes sense. It was kind of a no-brainer. All right, this is the Rose Expert, which I got for like 50p from a charity shop. And this is a book about roses and how to, I guess, cultivate and grow roses. I really enjoy these little rose images. I can tell you for a fact that maybe not this, but definitely this is from this book. Yeah, I don't know if they still make these, if they've been like updated at all, but I see these in charity shops absolutely all the time. Like there's a whole series and I've had to stop myself from buying different ones with different kinds of flowers, because if I could, I would have whole shelves of books just for collage fodder, but I need to rein it in to some degree. Like, hey, you can see I've chopped this up. And this has kind of a tenuous, very personal link with the deck. So roses remind me of my mum. She loved roses. She loved a rose garden. She was a big old flower nerd. I used to get really bored as a kid because we would go to some of the local like National Trust properties, and one of them had a rose garden. And it was the most tedious thing in the world for me when I was like 9 years old, because I was like, they all look the same. And she was loving it. But anyway, so roses really made me think of my mum. And she did not particularly care for tarot. I think her instincts probably would have been that it's a bit like spooky scary. I was trying to come out with a deck that also reminds me a little bit of my mum, which, like I say, tricky because this is not tarot, oracle, all this really was not her thing. So I had to get a little bit creative with this one. She definitely would not have gone in for the like inspirational, motivational, affirmational kind of decks. A bit too twee. She was much more of like a keep calm and carry on kind of person. And which I think works because this is much more of a practical guide than like a decorative coffee table book. So like that also makes a lot of sense with that connection in my brain. So the deck that I've pulled out is the Dreaming Way Lenormand, which I can't read. I got this on eBay because it came up at a really good price. and this is the deck that I will learn the system with when I have the time. And I think though that this matches up very well, because from what I know of Le Normand, it's very straightforward. It's a very practical reading system. It's kind of like short, sharp, and snappy and to the point. It's not nearly as like woo and deep thinking, psychological kind of a system as like tarot is. So I just feel like it makes sense. It matches up. I'm like, yeah, if my mom was gonna get into tarot and the like, it would probably be a Lenormand deck. So it just fits. Also, like, there's lots of flowers in this deck. Aesthetically, it doesn't not fit. There's also some like fantasy, whimsical elements to this deck, which I really like. So it all ties together very satisfactorily in my brain. The next book that I have is this Butterflies Handbook, which is totally beautiful. I don't know if I've managed to convince myself to chop it up yet, because it's absolutely stunning. It's these beautiful illustrations, and this is literally just like a field guide to butterflies. I love butterflies, so I was very happy to find this and to have a book just full of butterfly photos of all different shapes and colors and sizes that I can add into collage works. So the deck that I have chosen to pair with this seems like such a wild card, but bear with me. This is the Mary L Tarot, and it's largely, oh god, the Three of Swords on top does that. It's the art style. I feel there's a kinship between the art styles, you know? This very detailed illustration in the butterfly books, and then Marie White rather created the Mary L Tarot with these very detailed, I think these are all oil paintings, but it's very detailed. It's very kind of illustrative, fine arty. I'm not exactly sure what I'm getting at, but I hope you get the vibe. But like it makes sense to my mind. A lot of the colors also feel very similar. And there's also butterflies in this deck in the Fool card, which is one of my favorite Fool cards. So it makes sense. We're pairing them together thematically. Completely different. This is a field guide. This is one of the most like deep and time-consuming and like esoteric-y kind of decks in my collection. And then we've got a field guide to butterflies. Like thematically, they're not the same. Oh, but this is beautiful with the dragonfly here in the Two of Swords. So yeah, the Mary L Tarot with this handbook for butterflies. Okay, this amateur astronomy book by Colin Ronan, and this is from like the 80s. This was first published in 1979. So it's this now 40-odd-year-old astronomy book. I adore their fuzziness, and like, don't get me wrong, I love all of the beautiful new images that are coming out of like the James Webb Telescope and the improvements in technology, and the kind of images that they can capture are incredible. But I adore this kind of imagery for making collages, this slightly fuzzy, slightly more pixely. It's just got a bit of a dreamier quality to it, which I think works really well for the kind of collage art I like to make. So love this. This was such a good find. And I can't stop flipping through it. Oh, it's beautiful. So the deck that I'm pairing with this is the Voyager Tarot, which, let me tell you, it was a struggle not to pull a collage deck. Is this still in order? Yeah, I did a flip through. So this is still in order from then. It was a struggle not to pull a collage deck for every single one of these, because I use these books for collage art purposes. So collage decks felt right for all of them. But like, it's called the Voyager, and then we've got the Astronomy, and this also has a whole world suit in it when I get there. Yeah, this whole world suit just makes sense with the kind of imagery that is in, obviously, in this astronomy book. And also, when was this stick created? I think it was in the 80s or the 90s. I can't quite remember, but the quality of the images is very similar between Well, that's helpful, isn't it? Yeah, the kind of quality of the images is very similar between these two. And this was also my first collage deck, which I don't know why that feels right with the astronomy book, but it does. The Voyager Tarot with my amateur astronomy book. Okay, next up, I feel like I've shown this off fairly recently, but this is, well, it's technically a magazine, but it's so cool. It is a 30th anniversary of the ZX Spectrum and also the Commodore 64. It's full of fabulous 80s artwork and the kind of games and things. It's very pixely. It's super, super cool. It's in the custody of my partner because they want to give this a read before I start chopping it up, which is totally reasonable. So I haven't started working with this yet in like a collage sense, but because of that, because it's living on their desk, it's in their custody, this makes me think of my partner. So I had to pull a deck that makes me think of my partner, and it's the Gay Marseille, partly because we're gay, but also here, the Page of Coins, this is them, this is my partner. You can't convince me otherwise. They embody the Page of Coins so much as a person, and they've got green dungarees that they actually stole from me, and I'm like, this is they just need to like grow out their little mullet, and this is them. So this deck specifically reminds me of my partner. Oh god, it's just so freaking gorgeous, and that's all there is to that. This makes me think very much of my partner. This deck, the Page of Pentacles in particular in this deck, is like a portrait of them in a lot of ways. And so yeah, this is the one. This is fairly straightforward. I'm just flipping through, I'm just stalling for time because I love this deck so much. It's just delicious. It's so gorgeous. Okay, oh yes, yes. This Hierophant Pope is just, it's my favorite thing. Okay, we'll leave it there. This is the Reader's Digest, How Is It Done? Which was, when were you published? In 1990 was when this was published. And it's very cool. Again, it's got these slightly fuzzy images. It's got all sorts of cool stuff in it. It's going to be so good to have on hand for collage work because it's just so cool. Like this work, like it's just so cool. It's got all sorts of stuff in it. Okay, this one you're gonna have to stay with me. The deck that I'm pairing with this is the Next World Tarot, and it's because what struck me when I was flipping through this book, and like if I can get the contents page up, you won't be able to see the whole thing because it's quite a chunky book, but what really struck me when I was flipping through was like the things they chose to focus on, because the premise of this is just how is it done. It's like a how does shit work kind of book from Reader's Digest in 1990. And so it was really interesting to see that what they focused on was like organization of like transport and production and construction as well, like building things up and knocking them down. A lot of this is the world of like mass production of things, is where a lot of this is taken from. And I just thought that was really interesting as a little snapshot of what was deemed by the Reader's Digest to be worthy of including in 1990. And it's a little bit of a reflection of what was deemed to be important kind of culturally at that point in time. A lot of construction and production and like mass produce, a lot of capitalism basically. But you know, it's a little political snapshot in a sense, because everything is politics when you get right down to it. So it is an interesting little window onto what was thought to be worthy of attention at that time. And the Next World Tarot, is my most overtly political or politically charged tarot deck. Like I say, everything's politics. You can definitely argue that, like especially the Gay Marseille that I just showed, that any queer deck, any deliberately diverse deck is politically charged, because I don't know if charged is the right word, but is politically motivated because everything is politics. But this is the most, I think, overtly politically motivated deck in my collection. And so for that reason, I'm pairing it with this Reader's Digest book, which on the surface, you know, like I say, thematically, not so much. But this is depicting what happens like after the revolution or the dystopian nightmare that's coming, or both. So it's what could a world that we're recreating look like, and how would we create a society in that world, and how would we function, and what kind of communities would we be making, what would be important. Like it makes sense with what struck me when I was reading that book. Well, flicking through and seeing what was included was just what was deemed to be important. And so the Next World Tarot is the deck that I'm pairing with that. Okay, penultimately, we have this truly enormous book, which is Learning with Colour, Mathematics. I am obsessed with the artwork in this book. Like, I showed this off recently in my my last video, which was setting up a new deck study notebook and kind of how I'm doing deck studies. But the imagery in this is just so fantastic. Again, when was this published? First published in 1961, so that's 80 years ago. That's over 80 years ago. No, it's not. 1961 is over 60 years ago, because I can't count, which is ironic with the mathematics book, don't you think? But oh, it's fantastic. And so I've got two decks that kind of struck me. This is the Gill Tarot. Just those backs with some of the imagery and artwork in this book, purely because of the numbers in the minors, the way the minor arcana, which is now not here, we've got this imagery of each of the numbers in the minors taking up the center of the image, or like the main focus of the image. Like, it's pippish, but it's pips around the numbers, which is very cool. And so that was all that I was thinking. I was like, oh, a maths book, numbers. And then I also thought of the Navigator's Tarot of the Mystic Sea, which also, like, the colors are so spot on for the colors that have been included throughout the artwork of this book. Like, do we see what I'm getting at? I don't know if we do, but I promise you, they fit together. Again, this deck was published in the 90s, so they aren't particularly contemporary with each other, but I do think they work. I think they make sense. So, Navigator's Tarot of the Mystic Sea. It's also just kind of, this deck is very weird and wonderful, and some of the imagery in this book is also a little bit weird and wonderful. So that also fits. Like, it's interesting that because it's a mathematics book, but some of the imagery is a little bit more odd and surreal in the way that they're showing things. And I'm not quite sure what I mean by that, but it just makes sense. Like, I'm thinking like here, like, it's because it's a representation of a mathematical concept. Like, that's hard to make look real, because what's real is the roundness of the globe. And so in order to like represent the maths of that, you've got to kind of abstract it a little bit. There's some abstraction in this book, and then there's a lot of surreal goings on in this deck. Okay, finally, I actually bought this today from, I think it was the British Heart Foundation. That's not relevant. This is the Oxford History of Classical Art, and it's full of classical art. It's full of sculpture and architecture and pottery. We've got pre-classical Greece, and then through, beautiful, Venus, and then through to like Greece and Rome. It's totally beautiful. I love that a lot of the images are black and white for collage purposes. I think that's going to be really interesting and like good to work with. It's just so beautiful. And then I also really like that obviously there's a lot of depictions of gods and goddesses. Here we've got Aphrodite again. We've got Apollo here. So that's going to be really interesting to play with for like oracle images, because I can tie in some of those energies, some of those correspondences. That's going to be really fun to work with. Got some architecture. This is super cool. Like, the imagery is just extremely cool. I studied, as part of one of my A-levels, I studied some classical art and architecture, so this also kind of brings me back to that a little bit. We have truly a couple of coloured images, but the majority of it is black and white, which I genuinely really like. So I was dead pleased with this. Then where do we go through? With the Roman Republic, the later Roman period, the diffusion of classical art. What is the diffusion of classical art? Is that just British Empire nicking stuff? Oh god, it's so beautiful. There's some really nice photos. Okay, no, the diffusion is within the period, so it's within the classical period, so it's like, yeah, like Etruria. The pairing I have for this is really obvious. Can you guess? Can you guess? It's the Hellenic Oracle. I really want to start working with this because I recently acquired the Circe Tarot and I was like, oh, maybe I will start finally working with this deck. I pulled it out a couple times and then I saw this and I was like, you know what, I'm going to decide that that's a sign, as if bookshops, secondhand bookshops aren't full of books about classical this and that. I decided it was a sign. So I'm going to make more of a concerted effort to work with this. But like, of course, I had to pull out the Hellenic Oracle to pair with my History of Classical Art book. What I really like is that this classical art is majority pottery, sculpture, and architecture. I think there was some fine art in here, but maybe very, very little. So this is, yeah, sculpture, architecture, pottery, and then this is fine art. So they're kind of similar but different. I think they pair really nicely together. I think they'd be pals, you know? Maybe I should put them next to each other on a bookshelf and be like, you two just make friends. So yes, that is the Hellenic Oracle to go with my Oxford History of Classical Art book that I bought today for £3, I think, which is more than I like to spend on a book I'm just going to cut up, but it is a huge hardback, so I'm not too mad about it. Alright, that is everything. That is my collection of secondhand books that I have for collage purposes and all the decks that I've paired them up with. I really enjoyed this. This was fun. I liked showing off another of my collections, and I'm already trying to decide what I could do another one of these about. So let me know if you want to see a kind of another installment of this tag, because I think it's really fun. I like talking about my things. I like sharing my stuff. Like I said, I will link Candy. I will link her channel and her videos down below. Let me know if you're doing this tag because I'm nosy. I want to see your stuff. Yes, that's everything from me. Thank you so much for watching. If you've made it this far, I really hope you've enjoyed. Let me know what you think. Give me a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't already. Check out my Etsy, check out my Patreon, that's new. You know, all that good stuff. And I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.